Israel has received a warning from the Biden administration. If it doesn't boost the quantity of humanitarian aid it lets into Gaza during the next 30 days, it may lose its access to U.S. money for weaponry. In a letter dated Sunday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin cautioned their Israeli counterparts that the necessary improvements must take place. This demand has generated a great deal of discussion and may have a significant effect on the military and diplomatic plans of both countries. We'll analyze the ramifications of this crucial event and what it implies going forward in this video. During worsening conditions in northern Gaza and an Israeli bombardment on a hospital tent site in central Gaza that resulted in the deaths of at least 4 people and the burning of others, the letter was issued outlining U.S. policy regarding humanitarian supplies and arms shipments. More humanitarian aid reached the Palestinian area as a result of a similar letter that Blinken wrote to Israeli officials in April, State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said on Tuesday. However, that did not last. Miller stated during a briefing, "In fact, it's fallen by over 50% from where it was at its peak. To ensure that the amount of aid reaching Gaza increases from the extremely low levels it is now at, Blinken and Austin thought it was appropriate to make clear to the government of Israel that there are changes that they need to make again." According to Austin and Blinken's letter, for Israel to be eligible for foreign military support, it is necessary for the amount of supplies entering Gaza to reach a minimum of 350 trucks per day, and Israel also needs to implement more humanitarian pauses and strengthen security measures for humanitarian locations. They gave Israel 30 days to comply with the demands. White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby assured reporters that the letter was not intended to be a threat. The purpose of the letter was to reaffirm our sense of urgency and the gravity of our feelings regarding the need for a significant increase in humanitarian assistance. An Israeli official acknowledged receiving a letter, but she did not elaborate on its contents. Speaking anonymously to discuss a diplomatic issue, the official acknowledged that the United States had expressed humanitarian concerns and was applying pressure on Israel to expedite the delivery of aid to Gaza. The letter was written during a time when the administration was becoming more and more irate that Israel's bombardment of Hamas was causing needless civilian casualties and running the risk of engulfing the region in a much larger conflict, despite repeated and loud requests to halt offensive operations against the Palestinian organization. An Axios reporter published a copy of the letter online. According to Blinken and Austin, "We are particularly concerned that recent actions by the Israeli government, including halting commercial imports, denying or impeding 90% of humanitarian movements, and other restrictions, have prevented aid from reaching those in need." To ensure that America's support for Israel remains steadfast in the 3 weeks leading up to the U.S. presidential election, the Biden administration is making more demands of its ally and largest beneficiary of U.S. military aid to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. U.S. politics have historically placed a high value on funding Israel. This month, the president declared, "No administration has helped Israel more than I have." To starve Hamas, humanitarian organizations fear that Israeli leaders may approve a plan to cut off humanitarian aid to northern Gaza, trapping hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who are unable or unwilling to leave their homes without fuel, food, water, medicine, and other necessities. Last Monday, UN humanitarian officials reported that the amount of aid reaching Gaza is at its lowest point in months. According to UN spokesman Stéphane Dujarric, food is running out even though meals are being delivered daily to the 3 hospitals in northern Gaza that are barely functioning. These hospitals are dealing with dire shortages of fuel, trauma supplies, medications, and blood. There is barely any food left to distribute, and most bakeries will be forced to shut down again in just days without any additional fuel, he stated. Just one of the UN humanitarian office's 54 attempts to reach the north this month was made possible by Israeli authorities, according to Dujarric's report. 85% of the requests, he said, were turned down or postponed for security or logistical reasons. The Israeli organization that permits humanitarian access into Gaza, COGAT, refuted reports that the northern crossings have been shut down. According to U.S. officials, the letter was sent to remind Israel of its legal responsibilities under international humanitarian law, as well as the Biden administration's duty. to make sure that no recipient of U.S. military aid could obstruct, divert, or delay the delivery of humanitarian aid. The Health Ministry of the territory reports that since Israel launched its retaliatory strike in response to Hamas's attacks on October 7, 2023, over 42,000 people have perished in Gaza. It does not differentiate between combatants and civilians, but it has indicated that women and children make up somewhat more than half of the dead. A little over 1,200 Israelis were murdered in the Hamas strikes, most of them civilians, and 250 more were taken prisoner by militants. According to research conducted for Brown University's Costs of War project, the U.S. has given Israel military assistance totaling at least $17.9 billion since the conflict in Gaza broke out, which has intensified hostilities across the Middle East. Thanks to this assistance, Israel has been able to buy weapons worth billions of dollars, which it has used in its conflicts with Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. But in both places, a number of those strikes have also claimed lives. More humanitarian aid reached the Palestinian region as a result of a letter identical to this one that Blinken wrote to Israeli officials in April, according to State Department spokesman Matthew Miller. But that was short-lived. Miller stated at a briefing that it's fallen by over 50% from where it was at its peak. Therefore, the Secretary and Secretary Austin felt it was appropriate to inform the Israeli government that reforms are required once more in order to ensure that the amount of aid reaching Gaza increases from the extremely low levels it is now at. According to Austin and Blinken's letter, Israel must execute additional humanitarian pauses and bolster security measures for humanitarian areas in order to be eligible for foreign military help. Additionally, Israel must ensure that at least 350 trucks of supplies enter Gaza each day. Israel was given 30 days to reply to the inquiries. White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby assured reporters that the letter was not intended to be a threat. The purpose of the letter was to reaffirm our sense of urgency and the gravity of our feelings regarding the need for a significant increase in humanitarian assistance. An Israeli official confirmed that she had received a letter, but she did not provide further details. A copy of the letter was posted online by a reporter for Axios. We express special concern over the recent measures taken by the Israeli government, which include blocking or prohibiting 90% of humanitarian aid movements, stopping commercial imports, and imposing other restrictions that have prevented aid from reaching its intended recipients, Blinken and Austin stated. In U.S. politics, funding for Israel has always been significant. With 3 weeks to go before the presidential election, Biden has declared that no administration has helped Israel more than I have. Humanitarian organizations are concerned that Israeli commanders would accept a plan to cut off humanitarian aid to the northern Gaza Strip to starve Hamas. This would leave hundreds of thousands of Palestinians stuck in their homes without access to fuel, food, water, medicine, or other necessities. Last Monday, UN humanitarian officials reported that the amount of aid reaching Gaza was at its lowest point in months. According to the UN website tracking supplies, since October 1st, about 80 trucks carrying aid have crossed via borders in the north, down from about 60 trucks each day prior. According to U.S. officials, the letter was sent to remind Israel of its legal responsibilities under international humanitarian law, as well as the legal duty of the Biden administration to make sure that no recipient of U.S. military aid should impede, divert, or delay the delivery of U.S. humanitarian assistance. Over 42,000 people have died in Gaza as a result of Israel's retaliatory offensive since Hamas's attacks on October 7, 2023, according to the Health Ministry of the Enclave, which does not differentiate between combatants and civilians in its count. Of the 1,200 individuals murdered in the war, the majority were civilians, while another 250 were kidnapped by militants during the Hamas attacks. Still, a large number of those strikes have claimed civilian lives in both regions. Witnesses informed Reuters that an Israeli strike struck Beirut's southern suburbs early on Wednesday morning. This came just hours after the U.S. declared its opposition to the extent of Israeli attacks in the city, due to concerns of a larger escalation involving Iran and the growing death toll. Witnesses witnessed a column of smoke and heard a boom. It happened as a result of an Israeli military order to evacuate a nearby structure. 2 weeks after Israel started operations into the country's south that it claims are intended to drive out Hezbollah, The UN Refugee Agency reported that more than 25% of Lebanon was also affected by Israeli military evacuation orders. How do you feel? Will Israel give in to American pressure, or will this impasse have unintended repercussions? Share your opinions with us in the comment section below. In addition, please activate the notification bell and click the subscribe button if you thought this analysis was insightful. In this manner, you'll never miss our updates on world events that are changing the globe. I appreciate you watching.